respect your time. I know it's midterm week. It's the week before spring break. We all have a lot to do. Thank you so much for being here to learn about transparency and teaching and learning from our two wonderful presenters, Dom Ashby from English and Karina Powell from Sociology with me. They are part of our very large graduate profile infrastructure that Starr Wenzel has worked extremely hard to build and done an excellent job of building up. We have a very large team to help support this transition, all of the changes in the fall. We want everybody to feel really confident. We want everybody to feel prepared when we start the new essential education in fall 26. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dom and Karina to talk to you a little bit more about TILT.
Thank you so much, Allison. Welcome, everyone. Today we'll be talking about TILT principles and how to create transparent assignments and rubrics. This session will provide an overview of TILT and how to use the basic TILT principles to revise or maybe create some new assignments and rubrics that would be easier for students to understand and apply, sorry. So we will go over some impediments to students' understanding of the assignments and rubrics first. Then we will name and discuss the three basic TILT principles and apply TILT principles to the course assignment and rubrics. So what makes the assignment sort of vague and creates barriers to understanding it? So if you look at the assignment part, you could see like we outlined certain impediments there. So if the assignment omits the key details, then on the student part, you see that the students will overlook those key details. If the assignments are presented without a purpose, then the students will be unfamiliar with the genre. If the assignments lack a description of the processes or the big process, obviously the general understanding and like a step-by-step kind of description, then there will be a lack of proper scaffolding on the student side. And criteria is also a very important part of it. If we're using if there is a vague assessment criteria, then students, many times they just resist asking questions and they do not understand how they will be graded. Regarding the rubrics, again, if the rubrics contain vague criteria that aren't like detailed enough for students to understand and be engaged with the rubric, then there will be no understanding and engagement with the assignment submission. Lack of clear application of the rubrics can create, again, feedback, certain barriers from the students to understanding the future assignments. And just in general, inconsistent language can create this non-transparent sort of impediments to understanding. I really like this quote. It's not mine, it's Rusty found it. It's from KSU TILT Resources. It says, research on metacognition has demonstrated that students learn more and retained that learning longer when they have an awareness of why they are learning something and have control of how they are learning. So this is probably one of the like a big thing that we have to bear in mind when we are creating the assignments and working on the purpose, the task, and the criteria. Making sure that we are we set those goals to understand the rationale behind our assignments. And now Dom will continue with the more applied section of this workshop today and talk more about the transparent assignment template.
Right. Thank you, Karina. And I do want to apologize. I would normally during a presentation like this, I'd be standing up just to project a little bit more, but because we are recording to be able to have these, and here in this space where we're kind of stuck to the microphone here. So here I am sitting down. For the rest of the session, we'll be starting to look at and use this template. And you can access it here through the QR code. This was also the first link in the email that went out to you today. So if you have that session email, then you can access that. And this template is very helpful for structuring assignment redesigns around Tilt. First of all, if we're focusing on the front matter with clarifying the purpose, focus, and assessment criteria. And then it's also going to be having our focus for today on the assessment rubric as well. So I invite you to have this open to follow along while I'm going through a couple of these elements that are really central to using Tilt. And then also you can make a copy on your own. The view that you'll have will be a view only. So you can make your own copy. And then later in the session, when we're opening up time to start working on your assignment redesign, you can actually be working right there directly in the template in your own copy. This can also be a really helpful tool to share with other instructors or other folks in your unit who maybe didn't get to come today, but are wanting to apply Tilt. Now, on yesterday's session, we went a lot more into the background about Tilt, this transparency in learning and teaching, and looking at some more examples. Today, we'll be moving through that a little bit more quickly, do a quick overview, and mostly we'll be focusing on the hands-on part of this. So I'll wait just a couple more folks still have their cameras up. Is everybody able to get in either through this or through your through the email link? Okay, I think we're all okay. Yeah. Wi-Fi is not the best with this number of people. So when you can bring that up, please do. I'll go ahead and start working through a couple of these sections. So first, the purpose. When we're thinking about assignment design, clearly stating the purpose for students is something that can add a lot of transparency to it. Again, part of the idea of Tilt is that we as experts in the field and instructors who've been working in it for many years, there are things that for us have become second nature, right? They became second nature to us as students because we were long-term successful students. And then, of course, as we've become instructors and working with students, it has become even more and more ingrained in what we do. So there are things that we oftentimes that we take for granted or think would be easily clear that students should be able to automatically make some of these connections between what we are presenting to them and what we want them to take away. But research shows that and experience shows that this is not often the case, especially when you're dealing with, say, a general education course where this might be a student's first encounter with the discipline that you are engaging them through. And so a lot of these commonsensical things are not common sense for them. So that's a big part of what Tilt is trying to do, is to make these underlying these assumptions that we have to make them more clear. And that starts with the clarity of the purpose behind an assignment or behind an activity. Always good to make that very, very clear to the student. Why are we doing this? So what is this disciplinary connection, the disciplinary connection that they are gaining? And then also in the context of the essential skills, which essential skill or skills, and we do recommend in this context for Tilt redesign, each assignment or activity that you're doing a Tilt redesign with, focus on one or maybe two essential skills within that. Don't try to grab all 10 of them. Even if you have multiple ones that are maybe peripherally connected or tangentially connected, don't try to cover all of them. That becomes overwhelming for students. Instead, to build depth, we want them to be engaging or recommend for them to engage with one or two of the essential skills. But making sure that you are calling that skill or those skills out by name as part of the purpose, because that's a part of what we want to do with this initiative, is to make students more comfortable with and more aware of what these terms are and how, what these skills are, how we're talking about them, and to have a shared language across our different classes. Because that's another thing that can impact transparency, is that one discipline might be calling something one thing, another one uses a different term for it. If we can have this shared language or a shared lexicon that students are seeing again and again and again, that is going to give them some better clarity on here. So again, for purpose, we're thinking about a brief explanation of why, focusing again on the skill development, one or two skills, and then also what is this knowledge that we're coming from. So because we have a lot of time worked in today for interactive work, I'd actually like to pause here and give you all some time to pull up the assignment. So if you have an assignment in mind already that you're wanting to work on, to be able to start working on that, or if you haven't decided yet, you can talk at your tables, talk within your groups about what is a useful assignment that you'd like to start with. I do recommend to really add to the efficiency of this, if you have already decided which assignment or assignments you're going to be using for your assessment, for the skills assessment, grab one of those and start to apply that, to apply the tilt process to that here today. And to right now to focus in for the next few minutes on identifying what would be the purpose behind that assignment that you're going to work with for your redesign. And look at what you already have, if you have the assignment in front of you, or think about in your head if you're needing to just do this from memory. Have you stated a purpose? How have you stated the purpose? And then how might you take that purpose statement and make that more clear? Or maybe when you introduce the assignment, maybe you're in the habit of the purpose is just being shared with students vocally or verbally, and you don't have it written down on the assignment, right? In that case, this can be a great place to think about, well, what can I put in there as a clear introductory purpose statement for my students that calls attention to the essential skill and that calls attention to the disciplinary language that this is connecting to. Right, so I'll quiet down and give you some time to work, and then we'll ask for a couple of volunteers to share in a few minutes. So we'll give you about 4 minutes or so. And definitely while we're working, feel free to talk within your tables as well.
Do not allow these two parts in some of my assignments, like the list. The essential skill. I realized like I do this for Janet, but I don't do this for like sociology or how to something.
All right, everybody. We're going, I know it looks like people are having some really good conversations and getting some good work started, but we do want to make sure that we're getting an opportunity for the whole room to share some of what they're finding. So sticking here for a little bit with this beginning of the template. Can I get a couple of volunteers to talk about what have been some of the ways that you are addressing purpose right now with your redesign? And what I'd be interested in would just be if people could maybe share either reading from or describing what they had previously for the purpose area, if anything. And then what have you been focusing on now? What have you gotten started so far with your redesigned version? And also your thoughts about what is this template language helping you to focus on? Were you realizing something maybe new about the assignment from your perspective as an instructor as well? Volunteers, thank you. I'm just gonna come around here with the computer so we can pick you up on the mic since we don't have the box.
Well, what I realized from looking at this assignment is this is for the online music appreciation, and we have like the purpose is right now is in the module, the header for the module, right? Like the module instructions.
Yeah.
But I guess the idea, I'm attracted to the idea of restating that purpose in the assignment. That's basically just a doubt, just the more the merrier in terms of like the more times you do that. So that's a good idea. So I don't feel like I have to come up with a purpose. I've already have the purpose at the time, but it just to populate that throughout the assignments
Yeah.
and to connect it to the specific. That's pretty easy to implement, I think.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really strong one for anyone who's using, whether it's online teaching or if you're using Canvas heavily for the assignments, to think about. There's so many different ways that students can access those assignments, right? Because the way that they can navigate around, they might come to it, they might not go to the module, they might instead jump to it through the gradebook or through the syllabus, right, where it's showing here's the assignment that's due.
Yeah.
And so if they click into that, then they're not going to see the purpose again, right? They may have seen it once, but this way, if it's right there on the assignment, they get the reminder again. And that repetition can be really key for helping. Yeah, thank you.
Couple of things with the purpose. First off, the why am I doing this? I really like. We use it in our GSD 101 course. And I like that language a lot because I feel like more students can connect with it more, and in terms of it's a little bit just easier to understand, like, why am I even doing this assignment? I used to teach math, so I would get that question all the time. And so it was just nice to see. And then the other thing we talked about in our group was there's a lot of kind of subheaders with that purpose, like the connection to course goals and essential skills and real world applications. But I do believe a lot of those things can be kind of summed up in maybe just a couple of sentences within the why am I doing this, right? Maybe a sentence that focuses on one essential skill and then a second that focuses on another. And within that sentence, you can connect it to that real world application. Like, I'm going to practice writing an email to not only work on communicate effectively, but to also prepare myself for when I need to talk to my instructors. So something along those lines. And that kind of connects to all those. So not necessarily more of like a list, kind of like how it has here, but more of a couple of sentences that, we can even bolden the essential skills and the learning objectives and stuff like that to kind of show it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, definitely. This template is meant to be a tool and a guide, right? It's not a shackle, so you don't have to follow exactly the formatting that's on here. So for some instructor styles and in formatting choices, following this may be really helpful. Others of you might instead use this for, here's how I'm going to draft it, but then I'm going to turn it into more sentences or paragraphs. So do what fits with your style, right? We want the assignments and the directions to sort of sound like you, right? So you are coming across, as yourself and as an authentic instructor to your students. I think one important thing here, even if you're not like having a separate thing to pull out, a separate section for the skills, to do this idea of bolding the skill or having some way to very clearly make that pop more than other parts of it. So even if you're not using other subsections or bullet points, you might still consider, well, maybe those would be ones that I would pull out with that difference, right? In terms of the research on how the visual layout works, contrast, right? Difference is something that draws the eye, it draws attention, and generally people identify that as, oh, contrast means importance. So some way of making those essential skills pop on the assignment, on the purpose statement, so that students can very clearly find it and easily find it. Anyone else like to share one more, another example on this one? Oh, Karina.
Yeah, I would like to share because I'm still pretty new at this. Since I'm in faculty, I'm new to the team. So I just wanted to say, this being so helpful for me, even when I'm thinking about class activities that not necessarily graded, but like when you think about how this fits, and I usually write this down now for myself, but even verbally, if I'm communicating this clearly, like what's the purpose of it, how is going to be connected to the course goals, the essential skills they will develop, although I don't necessarily call it essential skills, I just say these are the skills that you guys will use no matter what kind of professional career or academic path that you will choose in the future. It makes them realize like the importance of what we're doing in a class, because sometimes students, they don't necessarily realize that you carefully chose this specific class activity so you can not only assess but like given hands-on experience with the certain concepts that you're working on, or like so they can go over the cases and things like that. But if you say this clearly, you could see more engagement, and like see that they're like nodding, like, oh, this is what we're doing for, okay. So even though it's like I have a class, Introduction to Sociology, for example, that's made up with like people from different majors, they're still on the same page. They realize even if though it's like a gen ed course, all these things that we're doing are going to be applicable to no matter what they do in the future, they professionalize. So I would also recommend when you're like planning your class activity to kind of think this through, how that fits, and even if it's not necessarily conveyed in a like a written way, like if you don't want to put it on a slide, at least like verbally convey that message, and you will see how student will react like for that, and there will be a much more active engagement to this class activity. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move then to the next segment on the template and focusing in on the task. So just like with the first part, you can customize this to yourself or to what is being needed for that particular assignment or that particular activity. Things you might include, what is it that the teachers are expecting students to do, right? What is it that you are expecting them to do? This could also be sort of forward looking, but what's the expectation? How should they do it? I gave the example yesterday of that in many of my upper division courses, I'm giving out assignments where students have to do a research component. And it's a 300 level English course. And I just assume that my students know about how to use the EKU databases and how to select good sources from that, because we teach it in English 102 and all these other things. But what I found very quickly was that some of my students had that knowledge, and then others did not. And that may be because they had dual credit from far away, or they had AP credit, or who knows, right? They may have taken 102 at a different institution and had transfer credit that did not approach research training in the same way that we do here. So I found that, well, I need to give students more explicit instructions on how to find using the library resources and how to select appropriate research sources to use here. So that's something that I add to my assignments now, and that I take time discussing in class. So this idea of what should they do, and also giving this idea of step-by-step approaches. Again, something that may be very rote for us or for a more advanced student, for a beginning or intermediate student can still be, they might need those step-by-step instructions. But even just like from my own experience, that again, sometimes you'll run into those advanced students who still would benefit from that step-by-step instruction that's in there. So we'll move over. Let me change dropper view again and come back over here to the template and bring that in. So here we've got a suggested layout of how this might go, right? So we've got the overview of descriptions of what the student will need to do, right? And this might be a paragraph, right? This could be, think of this as the introduction for the steps, followed by, we recommend doing the step-by-step instructions. What that helps with, if you're giving the overview, a very clear overview first, the students who get it can read that and they can jump in and start working. The students who need the more step-by-step instructions then have it here. So again, think about your document design. The way the document design can make instructions scannable so that students don't have to read everything necessarily in the exact order. Instead, they can locate easily and find the information that they need, rather than being, having to stop and find their way through. So using headings, using sections as a way to give students clear, transparent, right, markers of where the information is so they can find what they need when they need it. And you can see here there are other suggested parts, right? So following, in addition to those step-by-step tasks, you might also include, are there specific required components? Again, if it's not immediately clear, then to break this down. So, and oftentimes it's not going to be clear. Again, this is sort of the refrain. Things that might be clear to us are not necessarily for students. So you could call, and many of us do this, I know, but like calling attention to the word length, calling attention to, is there a citation style? Is there a certain order that you want students to follow, right? Does this need to follow an IMRAD organization, or is there some other discipline-specific organization for the document you want them to have? Make all of that very clear. And if you're doing that already in your assignments, awesome, right? That means that you're well on your way toward already doing this. But look for the other parts where you might need to add these in. So like last time, I'm going to give you all about 5 or 6 minutes or so at your tables to start working on identifying ways that you might make the task section more clear in a way that's appropriate for your students and for your assignment or activity. And then we'll come around and ask for some folks to share what changes did you do, or what changes are you planning, and some observations about that. Here we go. Okay. So insights about the task. What were some things that people tried out, have been focusing on as you've been working on the task? We had, just for the recording, we had a really great comment about the importance of sharing models with students, and we'll get to that here in a little bit too, because models can be important both for explaining the task, right, that you can be referencing to students, here's what it should look like, but that's also, but we in our template, we've aligned that with part of the criteria, but you can absolutely be mentioning it in the task section to say, reference the attached example. So we'll get to that here in a minute. But what about any other? What else have been some things that people are noticing about the task language? Either interesting things, difficult things about explaining the tasks, things that you're trying out now as you're approaching it from this tilt perspective.
Oh, sorry, I'll wait.
All right, yeah,
So what I'm having students connect it's a philosophy of education essay that my EDF 203 foundational education course does. And one of the things they are doing is they're in this philosophy of education paper, they are connecting their kind of experiences and how they think a classroom should run to the foundational theories of education, and putting those together and saying, this is how I think classrooms should work because this lines up with this, and all these things together. And what this has kind of made me think about is I'm maybe not doing enough pre-writing to have them reflect on how those things connect, to reflect on, well, what is it I really think about teaching, and what is it I really think about these theories and how they fit into my worldview, and kind of building in that time for them to consider what's happening before they really start even writing their draft. And I think not having that explicit, because it's not, I mean, we talk about it briefly in class and I just assume they're going to do it, but I don't know that they really are. And if it's not explicitly kind of in that breakdown of steps that they need to do, I'm not sure if they're even considering it. And so I think that could be really useful. And thanks for making me think about that, because I don't think I would have.
Right.
So yeah.
No, I like that. And I also, to me, hearing you say that reminds me of thinking about backwards design too, right? I mean, all of these things are interconnected, right? So it can even come down to, I think a lot of times we think about backwards design from the whole course perspective. But what you're bringing up here is that we can also be thinking about backward design within the assignment and as we are working on it. And this idea that if we are clearly stair-stepping out and clearly articulating what those tasks are, then suddenly that's going to call attention to us. I do think it's notable that with TILT, right, it's transparency in learning and teaching. And a lot of times we do focus on how do we make the transparency for learning evident. But in this workshop, I keep hearing examples too of how people are noting, oh, by doing this, it's helping making my teaching more transparent to myself. So this is a tool both for students and for instructors to be using, right? That this can be something that is helping develop our metacognition about our own teaching as well. I think that's great.
So John and I are in the middle of a course redevelopment for our ANTH 200, which is like our foundational archaeology course. And we were talking about with the tasks, our students are going to do a scaffolded project throughout the semester, but work on it in pieces. So we were talking about how we're going to use different pieces of that larger assignment throughout the semester, but thinking then and getting them to see how working on it in pieces fits with this larger goal. So they're basically going to get like this archaeology hypothetical site kit and then do different components of it to come up with an overall interpretation of what kind of site it is. But thinking in the like breaking up the task, how this fits in the larger parts of what archaeologists do and how this is building. And so making those connections in the task of how this is adding to this kind of overall summative project.
And along the way, building in essential skills and the criteria that we're being assessed on for the STARS reports. So having our assessments built into this longitudinal semester-long project.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, and it sounds like this could be something too that could really be broken down right into multiple assignments, and then each one. In here, this I think you by thinking of you have this series of activities and assignments that are all linked together. And yes, it becomes really important in situations like that to keep reiterating and explaining what's the purpose? How is this connecting in? And in this case, it's not only the purpose is here's how it connects professionally into the skills, it's also here's how this connects to the next leg of the assignment, right? And you can't do it if you haven't done this part yet. Great. Thank you. Any other observations? I don't want to miss anybody else.
So, in one of my, not the class that we're doing for the essential skills development, but it's a class that has a very complex sort of like collaborative problem solving task. And so it helps to outline all the different tasks they need to do. And then they're graded on how well they even understood what the task even was as part of their critical thinking. But they don't just do it once, they do it every week. So they have a chance to try to understand the assignment better. So they're getting feedback on not just how well they did the assignment, but also how well they understood the assignment. So that learning increases too.
Yeah.
So I think it's helpful to give them feedback, not just on did you do the task, but did you understand the instructions of the task too? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat. Well, and that definitely ties in with thinking about metacognition, how we can help develop metacognition and students' awareness of helping them become better learners, educating, teaching themselves to learn. Yesterday, we had talked a little bit about transfer of learning. And in transfer of learning, self-reflection is really important because that's something that helps students to take something from one context into another if they can articulate it. And reflection is a very powerful way to do that. And reflection works best if it is repeated, right? That it's not just at the end of the semester or maybe just at midterm and just at the end of the semester, but to do regular reflections, and it can be low stakes. And it sounds like you're doing this repeatedly in a really productive way. Great. Let's go ahead and move on to our final big category for TILT, which is looking at the criteria. And this would be where you're identifying what are the expectations. So, of course, in the tasks, in a way, that has set out certain kinds of expectations. Here are the steps that we want you to take. What we're looking at here is what is the person going to be evaluated on, right? What are the things that are going to be checked for success? And that can include things like the deliverable, the artifact that's being produced. It can also be the reflection, right? Part of the expectation can be that awareness of what did you do about your process. There are a couple of things that you can include that can help make this easier for students as well. So you might provide to them a checklist that they can use so they can be checking those off as they're going. Checklists and rubrics both can be used not just as a tool for the instructor, but a tool for students as they are working to make sure that they are hitting the requirements. And if you have opportunities in your class for peer review or for group work, these tools can also be very helpful for students to check one another, right? So these are great collaborative tools as well. I'll just throw in as a little freebie here too. I have had colleagues in the past who have also successfully built checklists and rubrics with their students. So they might be introducing the assignment and going over that with them and then working with the student, with the class to decide, okay, what should the rubric or checklist look like? And this is another opportunity for the instructor to check for understanding, and it gives students some agency that's in there. But the real, you don't need to do that, but the standard here would be to make sure that students have a clear sense of what the expectations are and how they're going to be assessed well before they get started, right? So it should come out to them along with the assignment itself. And then finally, you might notice here, annotated examples can be really helpful. And those can be positive examples. Those can be the examples that are really solid. Here's what to reach for. It can also be ones that maybe there are some issues. So it can be examples of what not to do, or it can be those examples of, well, here's a middling work of this, right? And here's what it's doing well, but here are the areas where it could go better. Incidentally, some of my colleagues will sometimes use AI to make those middling sections, right? In order to go through and say, here's what a machine can pop out, and you're a human, you should be able to do better than this, right? And then to go through with students to identify what can be improved on there. So let me check my time here. Sorry. We'll give you a couple minutes here. Again, if you do want to, by the way, if you'd like to take a look at a sample set of criteria, this is one of the other links that you've got in your email. This is a very thorough document that has criteria and all of the other steps and very detailed task steps. So you can look at that as a sample piece. But in particular, I just wanted to call attention to the criteria. Now, it's on page 12, but note it's not page 12 here on the left side. It's page 13. Yeah, so it's page 12 as it's listed on the document, but there's a cover sheet on there. So it's actually 13 on if you're using this side number. So this is this uses a pretty detailed rubric on here. So just to give you a model, if you want to look at that. But mostly I want to give you all another 4 minutes. We won't be able to do quite as long here to give you some time to work through and and think about how you might develop the criteria. And this can be a plan. Maybe you can decide, it would be useful to have a check sheet, or I know somebody else in my department who uses a checklist and I'd like to use that in mine. Or, maybe we can do a rubric, or maybe we can do this classroom design rubric. So come up with some ideas there for what things you might like to include, as well as how might be some ways that you might want to address using samples. So just real quick, and we probably only have time for one person to share, at least during the main session. And then we'll wrap up. But of course, if people are wanting to stay a little bit longer, absolutely feel free. We can continue the conversation. But anybody want to be our brave last volunteer for sharing something that you've done with your project or that you're thinking about doing for related to criteria?
So one of the things we've been talking about, even before we got to criteria in our group, is kind of student examples and how a lot of students will take examples, like we've said, and kind of just copy it for their own project and just use that, not necessarily as an example, but more as a template. One of the things I've done in GSD 101, where they have a presentation at the end of the course, is that I will take, past student examples that are non-identifiable, right? All the like identifiable information is gone, with specific slides, maybe a slide from each of the different types. And we'll have like a lightning round for 2 minutes. They're in small groups and they look at the example in front of them and they discuss it together. And then we talk about it for a minute after that. And the only thing they're allowed to have out at the time is their own presentation that they're working on. And I do not provide them the student example presentation, obviously because it's past student examples and I just don't want them to have it, but also for the reason of them not copying what past students have done. So the only thing they can truly do in that moment is either discuss with the people around them what's good and bad about that current slide, or interact with their own content to say, oh, everybody in the room said this was bad about this slide, and this thing is right here on my screen. I need to change it for me, or at least make a comment to myself and make notes and stuff like that. So just having a separation between student examples, past student examples, or samples of that material and the student that's in the current course.
That's such a great point, because there is, and there's always this tension, I think, so from my background in English, there's often a tension about whether, when, and how to share student examples, because it can very easily do exactly what you were saying. Students could treat it like a template and they are just recreating the same thing, and it can pull away from their creativity on that. So finding different ways. So I think this is a really great example of doing that. Others can be to, again, not give students a perfect example, right? To instead, and to take time in class to address, here are the strengths of this, but then here are also things that could be done differently or that could improve, or have a variety of examples to show, hey, here's how previous students have approached this in drastically different ways. And this is an approach that I like to use, is that I'll use 2 or 3 strong examples that are effective in different ways in order to show students, look, previous students have done very well at this, and each of them has done it in a drastically different way. And that opens up room for variation and creativity as well. All right, so let's see, we looked at the examples already. We've been working on applying tilt. I did just want to open up for any final questions or comments that people have about the session as a whole, thinking about all of these areas of purpose, task, criteria, or other things that may be related to tilt or to assignment redesign that we have not had a chance to really address that people were curious about.
Are these rubrics that are sort of standardized for the skills, are they standardized across the curriculum? So we would basically use the exact same essential skills rubric for Psych 200, our first class in our major, and our capstone course are using the exact same rubric? Or we would encourage use the same rubric that we're showing growth, or how are we doing?
So that's, I think, where the levels of mastery are going to come in. And what we're thinking right now, the current thinking is that the benchmark level will be GSD. The general education courses would be this milestone level of mastery. So that's where like Psych 200 would be, but your capstone course would be at the expert level of mastery. We would expect that courses within the discipline that's where students are mastering the skills, right? Showing that they have progressed to the level that we would expect of juniors and seniors.
Are we using the same rubric and we would expect a bunch of accomplished in capstone level, or are we using different rubrics for those different levels?
The indicators we would expect probably to be a little bit different. We're still kind of developing the rubric, but we're not expecting you to evaluate Psych 200 students with exactly the same criteria as capstone students.
Maybe a different
Different set of criteria. Yeah. And we'll keep you all updated as the rubrics develop. Part of that is going to be based on feedback that you all have given us, which thank you for that.
I just want to add one more thing. We are going to be doing Skill 10 workshops after spring break. You should expect to see some communication on that by tomorrow. That's our hope. We're trying to finalize those dates and locations now. So just watch out for those dates, but they should happen those last couple of weeks in March, like I think starting on March the 24th. So just watch for that to come out.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.